joining us for an update on the 2014-2015 school district budget and a look at how the district is progressing through its financial recovery process. I'm Matthew Cummings, Communications Director for Erie's Public Schools, and I'm joined today by Rick D'Andrea, Business Administrator for the school district, and also Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Jay Badams. Seems like just a few months ago that we were back here giving an update on the previous budget. So time flies, and we have a lot of mixed news, I guess you could say.
Seems like only yesterday.
Only yesterday. There you go. So to start off, Rick, if you could just explain to the viewers the difference between a preliminary budget, a proposed final budget, and then the final budget that garners a lot of attention every June.
Act 1 of 2006, excuse me, put together a timeline for the budget process, or changed the timeline for the budget process. And every year the new timeline is generated based upon certain factors. The timeline as it exists right now is preliminary budget is our first shot at the budget. It's done in early February, shortly after the governor does his or presents his state budget to the state. And this year, that date fell on February 19th. The school district had to do one of two things on February 19th, either adopt a preliminary budget or adopt a resolution indicating that the school district would not exceed the state mandated index for Erie School District. So on that date, we chose to adopt a resolution indicating that we would not go above the state mandated index. And by doing that, it gives you a longer period of time to work on the budget. It gives you until May 31st, which May 31st is considered the proposed final budget. Essentially what the proposed final budget is, it's any modifications or revisions you've made from either the preliminary budget, which is done on February 19th, to May 31st. In all intents and purposes, it's still considered a preliminary budget. Mm-hmm. And then after May 31st, you have 30 days to adopt a final budget. And that final budget then is what moves you forward into the next fiscal year.
So really the governor's announcement of the state budget proposal starts this process in February. Then you have February deadline, May deadline, and a June deadline.
That's correct, yeah.
So where did we begin back in February, and where do we see ourselves now as of the recording of our program today, which is May 1st, for our viewers, just to provide some context?
Back in February, when we started the budget process, we put together a working document which, after major modifications and changes were made to it, had a budget shortfall of about $4 million. Okay. $4,080,000. Since that time, we've been working pretty hard to try to get that shortfall down. We've been fairly successful in getting some of it down, making additional cuts to the budget. We've been successful in cutting about $1.5 million out of that $4 million. So good. As we stand today, we have about a $2.5 million shortfall, which we have essentially till the end of May to work on that. And then once we accept a proposed final budget, then we have another 30 days to actually finalize the final budget.
For those viewers, Dr. Badams, who have been following the district's budgets over the last few years, they've heard numbers of $26 million, $12 million, $9 million, and now Mr. D'Andrea mentioned the $4 million starting point back in February. To what do you attribute that change over the last 5 years?
Well, we've worked very hard to certainly control costs. We've made some big sacrifices too, as not just as a school district, but as a community. Mm-hmm. That first $26 million shortfall you referenced led us to eliminate 300 positions from our budget. That led to some larger class sizes, certainly diminished a lot of the administrative support that is provided, and really touched every sort of employee within the organization. The next year, we actually took the community through closing 3 schools, which was certainly unpleasant, but necessary. We had found through our reports that we had done through our optimization plan that we had at that time 7,200 empty seats, and our taxpayers were supporting all that additional real estate, so we were able to successfully close those. And then in that next budget, we sold a couple of those properties. So that's helped us to sort of do the large scale work of cutting the budget. But I think what's a little bit misleading when you think about the recovery that we've shown by going from 26 to 12 to 9 and now down to 4, is that it gets increasingly more difficult to cut.
Sure.
And so some viewers may be wondering that if we started this process back in February, why are we here at May 1st and we're still looking at another $2.5 million to cut? With as much as we've cut, it becomes very, very difficult to find other ways to reduce our expenses.
Rick, can you break down the initial deficit and what drives that every year? Obviously, a school district has to operate differently than, say, the federal government. We've all seen the clock ticking for the deficit in New York City. So at the end of a school, or actually the beginning of a year, you have a balanced budget. And so then the following year, why does it start initially with a deficit? What factors really drive that, not only here in Erie, but all around the Commonwealth?
Well, the major budget factors that drive any school district's budget, for the most part, are contracts, labor contracts. Those are the single most largest factor.
Okay.
Salaries. Salary increases from one year to the next. The next one is benefits, health insurance, life insurance, retirement. Retirement over the last several years has become increasingly more difficult to handle in that the state is annually ratcheting up the percentage that school districts pay into the retirement program, and they haven't been increasing it on a modest basis. They've been increasing it pretty steadily on an annual basis. It's projected to go in probably 3 to 4 years to about 30%. So essentially what we're doing is our total salaries, we're paying 30% on top of our total salaries just for retirement. This current year, the retirement rate is 16.9%. Next year, it's scheduled to go to 21.4%. So that's a significant increase. That's one of the larger increases in the budget. And then there's always charter school cost. That has over the years been more and more difficult to overcome because at one time, probably 3 or 4 years ago, we received about 30% reimbursement on our total cost out the door for charter schools. The governor eliminated that. At that time, that was about a $3.5 million revenue stream into the district. So with that elimination, that was one of the factors that we had to deal with the $26 million shortfall. So those are the main factors that. The one thing I would say is that even though contract or labor contracts are probably the single most largest issue that we have to overcome, we've been pretty successful in the district over the last 3 years working with our non-instructional unions, our secretaries union, our administrative union to somewhat mitigate the increased cost from one year to the next. So 3 and 4% raises on an annual basis are, you just don't see that anymore.
Not sustainable.
Not sustainable. And clearly our union realizes that. Our unions realize that, and they've been very good in renegotiations. 1 year, all of the unions, for the most part, took a 0% raise, took a salary freeze, and then from that point forward, they've been taking on average about 1% raise per year, which is, it doesn't even keep up with the rate of inflation, but it's reasonable. I think they're just happy to be working for the Erie School District, to be honest with you.
So it sounds like the challenge across the state, not just here in Erie, is that you have revenues that are flat or in some cases actually decreasing while your expenses continue to rise. And a lot of those expenses, like you mentioned, the pension obligation and charter school costs are largely outside of the control of the school board and the administration.
Right.
So
That's correct. Yeah.
definitely a challenge. So that being said, what adjustments have we made so far this year to get from the $4 million starting point down to 2.5?
Well, we've made, and I've lumped them together in maybe 5 or 6 categories. We made $1.5 million in cuts. The first largest one is estimated teacher retirements.
Okay.
We're estimating a savings of about $720,000 in teacher retirements. And that's not the elimination of teachers, that's just a salary differential from retiring teachers to new teachers. And so that's a significant savings. We made a few position cuts at this point, saving us about $99,000. Another positive thing that the district has done over the years is we've continued to increase employee contributions for health insurance. Mm-hmm. So we're estimating an additional $500,000 next year for employee contributions for their health insurance. So that was, we've added that to the cut list. The IT department has made some not staffing cuts, but some internal cuts, amounting to about $88,000, and then other cuts throughout the district have been about $146,000. We've made an additional adjustment to our revenue, which is specific to advertising, of about $20,000. So those combined cuts have amounted, either cuts or ads, have added up to about $1.5 million.
Good. Can you outline the district's revenue sources and the percentage from each of those?
Sure. Our total general fund revenue for 2014-15 is, as it stands right now, $148,798,905, almost $149 million. This is an increase of $3.9 million over this current year. Sounds like a lot of money. It doesn't sound like a lot of money. It is a lot of money. Right. But when you break down where those came from, you'll see that it really isn't, some of it is a help. The other part of it is just it's the retirement piece. Local revenues account for about $53.5 million, which is about 36%. Of that $53.5 million, $50 million of it is generated from taxes. State sources, excuse me, is approximately $90 million. That's 61% of the budget. And we have other revenue sources of $4.8 million. That's 3% of the budget. The major budget increases have been generated through basically two specific allocations. State sources have increased $1.2 million. That increase was specifically due to retirement. We essentially pay approximately half of the cost for the retirement for our employees. And how we do that is we'll pay that 16.9% times our salaries to the state, and the state then will reimburse us back approximately 50% of that. Okay. So $1.2 million of this increase is due to the additional cost to the retirement. So it appears as though that we're receiving more on the state side, but in order to get that $1.2 million, we're spending more than half of that to get it. So it really isn't an add when you compare the two. The other piece that makes up that $3.9 million is a change that the governor proposed in his initial presentation, and he proposed to change the accountability block grant program to what he has labeled the Ready to Learn grant. Accountability block grant currently in the district we use to fund full-day kindergarten at about $977,000 a year. The change that the governor proposed, we're not clear on specifically what we can spend it on. We do know it's targeted for K through 3 programs. And that increase to the district is a $2.5 million increase. So that is a significant increase. We don't know exactly how we can spend that yet, but we did add that to the budget to help lower the offset the deficits. So those are the main revenue sources and the changes.
So it sounds like, Dr. Bottoms, that a majority of the revenue comes from state sources. Is that similar to other districts in our region, or are we sort of unique in that respect?
Well, in our region, we're unique in that we get so high of a percentage of our funding from state tax. And that's something that I don't think that a lot of folks truly understand. I know it's always, at this time of the year when people are contemplating school budgets, they're worried that their taxes will go up. It's only a little over a third of our overall budget that comes from local property tax.
Okay.
So in a more affluent district, I'll pick on a Fairview, for example, that is reversed. They get a much smaller percentage of their funding from the state and a much higher percentage from their local property tax. And it has to do with your tax base and your aid ratio and so forth. So we do get a much different proportion compared to other districts. And
speaking of the tax base, the number of nonprofits in the city really drive that tax base down, essentially, from a taxable property standpoint. That's also unique to the city, correct?
Yeah, sure, and cities throughout the Commonwealth, probably throughout the country, because the city tends to be the county seat, so you have a lot of government buildings that aren't taxed. You have larger churches, a lot of nonprofits, and so in our city, I've seen numbers that range anywhere from 30% to 50% in terms of the amount of tax-exempt property, which just spreads out the burden among those other businesses and residences.
Right. So that's the revenue side. Mr. DeAndrea, can you talk about the major expense items in our annual budget and the percentages of each category?
Sure. I guess before we do that, one thing I would like to clarify is that when we started our discussion this afternoon, we said that our board approved a resolution not to raise taxes over the index.
Right.
I do want everybody to understand that the intent of the administration and the board is to not raise taxes at all.
Right.
That resolution was just in order to enable us to go on the extended time frame and then be able to work through the budget through the May. So I don't want to give any viewers the impression that we're going along the lines of increasing taxes again for next year to the index.
Right.
So our full intent is to do everything we possibly can to not raise taxes next year and to balance this budget on what we get from the state and local sources and what cuts we can make. General fund expenditures. Our general fund expenditures in next year's budget is $152,879,407. And that is an increase of $8 million from this year. Significant amount of money. When I break those down, I think it's important to know, first of all, that in years past, whenever we've done a budget presentation and in all of our documents, you see the single largest increase to the budget is salary increases from one year to the next and benefits. And as I had indicated before, we've done a lot to mitigate that cost. Although it still is a cost, it is substantially lower than what it's been in previous years. So some of the increases that make up that $8 million, charter school increase costs of $2.4 million, retirement increase, that's a retirement rate increase that we talked about from this year to the next, $4.3 million. We have salary increases of $1 million. Not that $1 million is not a lot in salary increases. It is, by any means. But probably 4 years ago, those salary increases were probably $2 to about $2.3 million from one year to the next. So we're working our way down to somewhat make them manageable. And then we have other increases throughout the budget of $340,000 just for the cost of living, utilities, contracted services, things of that nature. So as you can see, the two largest increases right off the top are charter schools and the retirement increase.
Right.
Those are two things that, although I like to say it's out of our control, the retirement increase is somewhat within our control. It's based on our staffing and our staffing costs. So the more we cut in staffing and staffing costs, the more that goes down. But
the percentage increase that you're required by the state to pay, which is now going to, you said
21.4.
21.4 is state law, and
yes.
that impacts all school districts. Let's stick with the charter school topic for a moment. And Dr. Badams, how do charter schools factor into to the budgeting of the public school system?
Well, Rick's already outlined the impact that those costs have on us. And when the law was originally written, Rick also mentioned that there was a subsidy. There was essentially a rebate that the state gave us based on our charter school enrollment that at the time was 30% of your total costs. And really with more than 10% of your students going to charters, that number bumped up to 40%. That's still in the law as far as I know. But it of course has the caveat that if funded, and the governor has chosen not to fund that since the beginning of his term. So if we just had that funding that's written into the law, that would amount to close to $8 million. And when you think about our budget shortfall, that would certainly remedy it. But again, that's the way the charter school law is currently constructed. All the money goes into one pot, and then that money is then dispersed out to the charter schools based on a formula. In our case, it's roughly $8,500 per student, and even more for a student who's receiving special education services. And we have no control over that. So that is a challenge, and it essentially pits the district against the charter school in terms of really having to compete for funding. So you see things like charter schools advertising pretty aggressively. Now, taxpayers need to pay attention to that, because that's those are again tax dollars that the charter schools are using to advertise to then take more resources out of the regular school district. Right. So it's a flawed law. I guess the bright side is that I think everyone at this point understands that it's a flawed law, and legislators are beginning to address the issue. There are a couple of bills currently before the Senate and the House that I think are flawed, but they're steps in the right direction. I think there's a lot more work that needs to be done there.
Mr. DeAndrea, what does that, all told, what's the impact to the budget every year for charter schools?
Well, for next year's budget, it's estimated $17 to $18 million, which is 11% of our total budget.
Okay.
So it's a significant amount of money.
Right.
And it has steadily grown over the years.
So I think it's important for viewers to understand that when they pay their tax bill, when they see their state taxes, that they're not only funding the 18 schools that are part of the Erie School District, but also the charter schools that they drive by every day, or the PA Cyber School, or the other cyber schools that they see advertised on television. I mean, it's the same dollar for dollar, right?
That's correct.
There's a lot of talk about funding formulas and even property tax elimination in Harrisburg. What are your thoughts on those proposals? Again,
like the charter school legislation that is starting to be developed, I believe that our representatives are understanding that there are some significant challenges facing communities to fund their public schools. And so at least there is a movement afoot to develop or to investigate developing a new funding formula for public schools. My hope is that they'll get it right, that they'll find a way to equitably fund schools in communities like ours, in which you do have an eroding tax base and you have a high percentage of tax-exempt properties, and frankly, you have students in an impoverished city who have a lot of challenges that are costly from the educational side to remediate. So I think those things need to be part of that formula.
Rick, let's go back to local taxes and local property taxes. Obviously, they're assessed by what's called in Pennsylvania millage rate. Can you go through the district's millage rate history over time and where we're at now as opposed to where we were years ago?
Sure. I have 25 years of millage rates here, so this may take me a little bit to go through. But, no, I'm only kidding. I did go back 10 years though, and I kind of condensed it into certain blocks. I went back to 2004-05. Back in 2004-05, our millage rate was 16.4187. In 2005-06, we raised it to 17.0687, which is an increase of 0.65 mils. From 5-6 through 10-11, which is 5 years, that's the same millage rate that existed. We didn't have the school board did not raise taxes, any administration did not raise taxes for a 5-year period. That doesn't mean that our cost didn't go up every year.
Right.
That just means that we absorb them either through using a fund balance or other means to do that. 11-12, or from 2010-11 to 11-12, we increased taxes again. 11-12 was the first year that I think we had the $26 million deficit. In order to help us through that, we raised taxes 1.69 mils. And then we raised, so it went from 17.06 to 18.7626. And then it remained at that rate for the 12-13 year. 13-14, our current year, it's important to, although this appears as though it's a decrease, we went through reassessment. The reassessment was implemented countywide in January of 14. So our total assessed value increased in the city, and our task is then to accordingly reduce the millage rate so that there is an equal effect. And so our millage rate went from last year to this year, it went from 18.76 to 16.62. Now again, that appears as though it was a decrease, and it is a decrease, but in essence, it should have been decreased more if we would have equalized the revenue. We increased taxes 1.15 mils from last year to this year, which accounts for the 16.62 mils.
Okay.
So if you look over the past 10 years, the millage rate has been increased by 3.5 mils over the past 10 years. Not to say that I mean, any millage increase is significant, especially to fixed income retirees who are struggling to pay their taxes. But it's just been increased 3.5. I won't say any more about that.
And Matt, if I could, that's just something that we have to face. And when we went through the process of trying to balance the budget when it was $26 million in 2011-12, that period of time during which we did not raise taxes, Rick alluded to the fact that our expenses continued to grow. Right. Our charter school costs grew. Essentially, our salaries and benefits. That was also a period of time during which we've had the current teacher's contract, which essentially guaranteed approximately a 4% raise over that 5-year period from 2010 through now, through 2014. And so our expenses went up by well over $2 million a year over that period of time, at a time when we did not raise millage. And I think that's important for everyone to understand. So at the end of that period of time, we had a tax increase, right. Unavoidable. Because expenses go up, that's why taxes go up. And we're stuck in this cycle of having to cut our budgets each year because of the deficits that naturally occur because of our fixed cost increases. And that's not, in my mind, a sustainable way to operate any kind of an organization. So I think our public needs to get used to this cycle of, we'll do everything we can to curb costs, but at some point we have no choice but to raise revenue. And so, last year we did raise taxes essentially, even though we decreased the millage rate. This year, it's the administration's intent, as Rick said, and the board's intent to hold the line on taxes this year. But next year is going to be another budget, and it'll have its own challenges. And so, in all likelihood, we'll see a mild or small increase again in the following year's budget.
And a lot of that depends also on what happens in Harrisburg with regard to the funding formula that we talked about, and also the gubernatorial elections that are coming up this November, especially for a city like ours where a good majority of the money comes from state sources.
Sure. Well, and you asked a question earlier about some of the proposals with regard to a funding formula. There is an attempt right now to try to eliminate the property tax as the primary source of funding for schools. Right now, the Pennsylvania School Boards Association and some other organizations are lobbying quite heavily against that, simply because the proposed legislation right now that would shift those taxes onto more of a sales tax or an income tax. It still doesn't address the underlying inequities in the funding formula.
Right.
So they're trying, like I said before, but we're still looking for a fair way to, fair to taxpayers, fair to the schools and the families and students that we serve. But at least they're doing that work, or they're trying to.
So we talked a lot this afternoon about where we're at with the financial recovery, or actually we've talked a lot about this year's budget. What we'd like to shift to now is just where we're at in this overall picture of financial recovery for the district.
Well, again, focusing everybody's attention back on Harrisburg, I feel like the organization and the community has done a great job in reining in expenses, certainly in doing more with a lot less. We have no choice in the matter. We've been making those difficult decisions and moving forward. I am a little fearful that people are starting to get the sense that, well, we went from 26 to 12 to 9 and now to 4. We're out of the woods and everything's fine. That's not the case. Unless the state is successful in developing a new way to fund public schools, it won't take long for us to have cut everything we can possibly cut, to be running as lean as we possibly can. When we get to that magic point, we're still going to have inflation that's going to rise at an annual rate of anywhere from 2 to 3%, guaranteeing that our expenses will increase. We're still going to have things like insurance and other benefits that will have increases. And this pension problem that is another huge issue for the state to resolve will guarantee that our pension obligation will increase beyond 21.4 for next year's budget up to about 30% by 2018. When you start to put those factors together and you throw in charter schools and those increases, you get a picture pretty quickly of a district that's back in a situation where we're facing double-digit shortfalls in terms of millions, and even budgets that will be even worse than the $26 million shortfall that we had just a few years ago. So it's a problem that needs to be solved, and it needs to be solved in Harrisburg before we'll be able to really get on a sustainable and firm financial footing.
Good. And I think you answered my last question, really. What's the financial outlook in the future? Either of you, anything to add to that?
Well, it's hard to say. I think we've done a lot over the last several years. We've accomplished a lot over the last several years to do things that haven't been done in Erie School District for probably 20 years. We've eliminated a lot of staff. We've mitigated, for the most part, salary increases going forward. We're doing what we can to offset health insurance increases going forward. That doesn't mean that our health insurance isn't going to go up. We're self-insured, so it's totally dependent on our use. We have an optimization plan going forward, which it's a tremendous plan. If we're successful in accomplishing that, I think that will have a huge impact on where we are today going forward. Now we have a 5-year projection, a financial projection, which even though it looks kind of ominous, it enables us to plan for the future. So I think we've put a lot of things in place over the last 4 years that will help us through the next 4 years. It's going to take a lot of work within the district. I think we're still going to have to do a lot more with less. We're going to have to do a lot more with less people. I don't know how far we can go with that until we start feeling it, but I mean, we're feeling it now, but from an educational standpoint, feel it. So I think it looks somewhat positive. I feel very good about what we've done to this point. I feel very good about that. If we're able to get the funding formula fixed, and one simple thing of maybe putting back that reimbursement for charter
the
schools,
charters, right.
I think we're in excellent shape, not only for balancing the budget, but putting money away for the capital projects plan
Right.
going in the future. So I think there's a lot of positive things that we can look forward to.
Good. I think we'll end it there. And I thank you for watching. I thank you for your continued interest in Erie's public schools. Continue to watch Channel 8 for further information, obviously our school board meetings, and also visit eriesd.org/budget for more information on the budget. Thank you both for joining us today, and thank you for watching.